opinions, #opinions. So please do keep that in mind, that we are all representing ourselves individually, as well as really just to ask you, come in and say, there is a place for everyone. So part of that is we respect everyone, and we will try to get to your questions in the order in which you put them forward, or if they directly correspond to an item that we are currently discussing. So don't worry, we will try to get to all of your questions as much as possible. And with that, I want to introduce some of our panelists tonight. So if you're not aware, we are talking about how to get hired this year. One of the hardest years to get hired in tech. And so starting with Miranda. Miranda Provence is Director of Development at Mostly Serious, where she leads a small team of web developers. At Mostly Serious, she works with a talented group of designers, writers, and developers to create beautiful websites that help companies solve problems and deliver measurable results. Outside of her day job, Miranda finds as many ways as she can to give back to the tech community with a focus on making it more diverse, inclusive, and accessible.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Stacy.
Next is Jarae Comstock. Jarae has an extensive 5+ years of experience in the IT industry, specifically in the role of a business development manager. Her expertise lies in recruiting engineers, developers, cloud architects and engineers, and DevOps engineers. She's honed her skills and knowledge to effectively identify, engage, and place top talent in these critical roles within the technology sector. A notable aspect of Jarae's professional journey is her strong passion for fostering diversity and inclusion within the tech industry, especially by empowering and enriching the careers of women professionals. This dedication is reflected in her active involvement in supporting and advancing women in tech careers. Jarae is deeply committed to breaking barriers and creating more opportunities for women to thrive and succeed in what has historically been a male-dominated field. In her current role as a senior client partner at Refactor Talent, Jarae exemplifies her genuine passion for people and her exceptional understanding of her clients' needs. As a senior member of the team, she brings a wealth of experience and expertise to effectively serve her clients and deliver exceptional value. Jarae's approach involves building strong and meaningful relationships with both clients and candidates, ensuring a tailored and successful match between the talent and organizational requirements. Thank you, Jarae.
Thank you.
And lastly tonight, unfortunately, we had a last-minute cancellation, but we're kind of going to bring her in spirit with Melissa Conrad embodying the body or mind, maybe not the body, of Cynthia Libby. So Cynthia Libby was unable to join us today, but she did provide a question answers to a lot of what we are talking about here, in which Melissa will actually recite on her behalf. And so with that, Cynthia Libby is an automation program advisor at UiPath. She enjoys mentoring RPA developers to produce automations that help their employees be more productive and energized. She has over 35 years of experience working with all types of software automation. So there's our panelists. And of course, I am so excited to get to learn more. So first off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are currently in your career? I know we had our kind of bio overview, but feel free to chime in with just a little bit of where you currently see yourself in your career and where you're kind of working towards.
So should I start?
Go for it.
Okay. So hi again, I'm Miranda. I am at a director level in my organization. We're a small web and digital agency. We have 15 people total, I believe, and I lead a team of 4 developers, including myself. I've been with the company for 11 years and leading the team for 9. And outside of, the owner level positions, there's not necessarily anywhere to go up. So I'm kind of in that most senior position outside of, being a majority owner of the company. I really love the company, so I don't necessarily see myself going somewhere else. If anything, as I transition to something as I get older, maybe getting more involved in some nonprofit work, within diversity in tech or supporting women in general.
Yeah, I'm Jarae. So I have been in the recruiting space for about 5-6 years, really specialize in development recruiting, engineering recruiting, and now I'm a senior client partner with Refactor Talent. So I actually work with the hiring managers and the directors on a consistent basis, CISO, CIOs. So what I really do is focus on finding the right candidates for them and really, supporting that diversity inclusion within those roles, for the people that we're recruiting. So really for me, I just see us continuing to build as a company. We're a pretty small company as well. We have probably about 10 people, but we all share the same vision of helping people out and helping one person a day, even if that's not something that falls into our realm of experience or what we do. We always want to be connecting people to the right opportunities or making sure they know what opportunities are out there for them. So just continuing to develop myself and then other people within the field too.
Speaking on behalf of Cynthia, Cynthia says, I am currently an individual contributor at the end of her career, retirement. Yay!
Well, and I guess I can bring a little bit of stuff in here. Just from my perspective, I'm a senior staff engineer, principal engineer. So I'm in a kind of a similar position to Miranda over here. So really just I know where I want to be eventually is like CTO, SVP of a bigger company, CTO of like a midsize. But I'm crazy ambitious. Which gets me into trouble. Workaholism, it's a thing. So with regard to that, so like what's currently within your purview specialization in typical work week?
I can go. For me, I'm talking to CTOs, CIOs, directors, managers on a consistent basis to really understand what they need on their team, like understand their talent gaps. And then we go to market to find candidates for those talent gaps. So I am consistently talking with those managers and then finding the talent to fill those gaps. That could be on a contract hire, direct hire basis. But that's typically what my week looks like. Talking to a lot of managers, talking to a lot of candidates, making sure that, it's like putting a puzzle together, making sure that they all fit for the right reasons and they're qualified for that position and making sure the candidate's interested in that opportunity or that company.
For me, my primary responsibilities revolve around making sure that the development work coming out of our shop is good, high quality, efficient, on time, all of those to the best of our ability, right? And then also making sure that my team is happy and content and that we can retain them over time too. So what that looks like is I'm often at the front end of projects, especially the biggest ones, helping in the sales process with estimating. Once a project gets handed or sold into work, I'm in design meetings from sitemap to UX to UI, And then again, on those bigger projects, I can act as basically the technical project manager, setting up tasks, breaking things down into chunks, and distributing them across the project team. And then of course, I'm also just, there to ensure that every little thing goes well. So, and especially at a company of our size, I'm the security liaison. I'm making sure that we're all as secure as we can be. And then I also, we have a leadership team too. So spend a decent amount of time thinking high level about the business with the leadership team.
Cynthia says, Cynthia advises their customers on adopting and using their software, and Cynthia works from home 5 days a week.
Okay, so kind of to this next point, right? So like what stages are you involved in the hiring of staff? Really kind of going into some more depth around like what levels of staff are you hiring? How involved are you in hiring of people like outside of your direct command or within like your normal purview? So especially with things like Jarae might be encountering with especially like executive search, and as much as that can be hybridized at like the principal and distinguished engineer levels, right? And then, to that extent, do you have a say in like hiring your boss or hiring the boss and the team, right? Especially with like Jarae, and how involved are you in like crafting that?
Mm-hmm. So I'm involved. It really depends on our clients, but I'm involved in like anything from an IT help desk up to like a CISO or a CIO. So we see all levels of hiring. So it's really dependent on our clients' needs. So we go through multiple different positions. We just specialize across IT. And so we are really involved in that hiring. Typically, when a client comes to us, that's what we do. It's a service that we provide, is finding those candidates. So when a client comes to us, it's usually on an exclusive basis. So we are providing the only candidates that they are going to see. So, with Refactor, we really focus on only providing 2 to 3 candidates to that manager, director, whoever it may be. But we put a lot of time in sourcing into those candidates, finding those candidates, and then putting them forward to the client. So we are really involved in that with that process. I think typically it's a very high likelihood that one of those candidates is going to be chosen and hired. So we're very involved in that process. Eventually it will get down to like HR or whatever the next steps need to be, but it's something that we're very involved in. As far as my boss, I did not hire my boss, but I will have a say in who we bring onto the team. We're a small company, but we're looking to grow. And I will be, involved on who comes onto the team, who's on our sales team, and who's on our recruiting team. We want to make sure that we all share the same passion of, really striving to help people. So that is something that I would be involved in.
For Cynthia,
No,
for
go ahead.
Cynthia, she is involved in the initial and panel interviews. The level of staff that she is involved in hiring is junior to mid-level. And how involved is she with hiring those outside of her direct command? She's very involved, and she does have a say in hiring her own boss.
So for me, I'm involved with hiring all levels of technical talent on the team, and lead that part of the process. My boss is an owner, so I don't necessarily know what that would look like if he moved on. There's a chance I would probably apply for that job. So I guess I can't really say if I would be involved in hiring my boss. I suspect I would be, but I also might put my name in the hat. So maybe I wouldn't qualify to be involved in the process.
Oh, that's a that's a great perspective, Miranda. So, kind of to one of Jarae's kind of comments where she said that we work direct with clients. We are direct contractor. So, can you go into a little bit of differentiation between various like recruiting firms and what they could be working with, necessarily like open contracts versus the kind of the direct model that you talked about a little bit?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of things with like recruiting agencies. I think a lot of us do get a bad rap, but also there's some bad recruiters in the world. But so typically we do contract to hire or direct hire. So contract, that would be something where you're contracting through our company, Refactor Talent, for like a larger entity, maybe like a United Airlines, and you would be contracting with them for like a couple years, or you would do a contract to hire. During that, a lot of enterprise level companies do contracts. So during that contract, we do offer benefits, we offer 401k, everything during that contract period. You're just contracting during that time. And then you also have a contract to hire, which you could work a contract for like 6 months, and then you would convert after that 6 months or maybe a year, depending on the client. And then we have direct hire, which is a search where we go out and we find someone that's going to, from the bat, they're going to be with the company 100%. They're going to go through the company's benefits, and they're going to deal with that company HR when they're a direct hire. So that would be like a salary standpoint. And then contract, you typically do from a per hour basis. So, there's a lot of great opportunities you can have as the contract, but you want to make sure that you're taking care of whatever you want as a salary. Like if you want 120K, you should divide that by 2080 and probably add a couple dollars for that per hour basis. Most recruiters won't tell you that, but you want to make sure you're covered for benefits. You want to make sure you're covered for PTO if it's offered or if it's not offered. But there's a lot of great opportunities. So contract is just done on a per hour basis, and it typically moves a lot quicker than a direct hire opportunity.
And I kind of wanted to talk, just to get your perspective. There's a difference between a direct relationship contract and kind of an open market contract. And I think this is where you hinted in some of the reputations not necessarily being the greatest, or getting some very odd hits.
Yeah. There's a lot of larger companies that work with like VMS programs, very large MSP VMS programs. So those are like vendor management programs, and they typically just funnel out all their jobs to multiple agencies. So you might see the same job by like 10 different staffing agencies. And so when you're working with those type of agencies or jobs, you have very little feedback. Those people are not engaged with the manager, and they're not consistently talking to the manager, versus like something where it's direct. Like with us, is we have that direct contact with our managers. We have interview times on our manager's calendar. Like we want to make sure that the candidate experience is, you guys are having the best experience, because I feel like that can drag out and it gets tainted a lot throughout the process. But when you have that direct relationship, you are working with that manager or that director, versus it just being funneled out to like a ton of different agencies, and they're just kind of submitting whoever they can, if that answers your question.
No, that's perfect. And so like what maybe changes with the way you want to apply to like positions like that, where you see it posted multiple places, or is it kind of maybe a little bit of a red flag? I don't know.
I don't think it's a red flag. I think a lot of it just, you may never hear back depending on the recruiter or the person. But I think that you should ask for those expectations with the recruiter up front. I have in the past at my last company have ran multiple VMS accounts, mid-market, and then solutions accounts. So I was like all over the board. But when I talked to a candidate, I would let them know, hey, this is going through a VMS. Typically we can submit within 48 hours. So it's probably, when we get feedback, it's probably going to be a week from now and when we're going to schedule your interview or when they want to schedule next steps. So I think the biggest thing is setting up expectations and asking them, what are the next steps? When do you expect that I will hear back, and like following up with them. But I think a good person would let you know the expectations, or if they have that direct contact with the manager, or, where they're being submitted to.
So kind of one for the group. And this got, kind of tossed in here. And we talked a little bit about this in the previous session, but how do you personally, and Miranda, I don't know what your process looks like. I have some idea with Jarae, just my dad's a technical recruiter. It's there's things to that. But like, how do you scrub through when you've got now 500 applicants? I think what's really interesting is there was a remember King of the Hill? And there's a joke where he's like, I applied to 40 places and I didn't hear anything back. And we're like, that's funny, because back then we thought that was a joke. And now we're like, oh, that's expectation. So how do you scrub through that many people effectively?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have only posted to Indeed once, and that's because I don't really find value in getting that many applicants. What I found to be helpful recently is we work in a content management system called Craft CMS, and they have, I post a job in their Discord, and there's a website specifically for Craft CMS jobs. And then I do post locally, even though there aren't that many craft developers around, just to see what's out there and to, prioritize local if we can. And for me, I've actually found much better candidates from having a much smaller pool of very targeted devs that already come in with a skill set we need. And that has worked a lot better. And then, I think maybe I got 20, 30 submissions in the last round, and I can scrub through those. They might be coming in a little bit here and there. That's not too big a deal. But the last time that I did Indeed, I don't even remember. I mean, it had to just be a very quick scan, looking at experience and skills to see what rose to the top.
For me, I think it's depending on the position. I look at, sometimes it's really hard when there's that many candidates, but I feel like I'm able to like quickly go through it. I also look at if there's a portfolio, if there's a GitHub, if there's a Stack Overflow, if we're hiring for like a UI UX designer, typically, like if I will click on their LinkedIn profile to see if their portfolio is on there. And I usually always go to that, because if you're looking for that position, it's pretty telling on if they're going to be a good fit for that position or not. And so that's typically what I'll look for. And then also in their responsibilities of their job, like application were they developing, what technologies were they using on the front end or the back end. So I feel like I'm able to scan through that really quickly and pick up like the technologies within the body of like their responsibilities on their resume or LinkedIn.
So how do you feel about the like open position or ghost hiring kind of links that have become kind of common?
Yeah, I've been seeing those a lot. So, I have never posted one of those, so I don't really understand what they're looking for, because I feel like you can get a lot of applicants. But what I do is like during COVID, it was like probably the worst time for hiring, I think we could all say. And there was times where we didn't have jobs and I was recruiting, but what I would do is go look for really good DevOps engineers or .NET C# developers and, full stack devs. And I would just call them and talk to them and understand their experience. And I actually would, proacted them to our clients to say, hey, this is what this person's looking for. So I guess it's kind of the same thing. But when I think about a client, what they're looking for and what their culture is, and I talk to a candidate that matches that, I really want to make sure that gets in front of the client, even if they're not hiring. Because right now, a ton of companies are doing their budgeting for 2024. So they are going to be hiring in 2024. So it's always good to have that resume in front of them and they can quickly go to that. So I would say that's something similar, but I have been seeing those a lot. So I don't know if they're doing the same thing or if they're just keeping like an active pipeline of people.
So is the idea there just having like a form or, an email to submit something to at any time? Is that what you mean by that?
They
Or is it?
basically have a job opening that's got a fairly generic, but it might say like looking for C# developer, like senior C# developer, right? It might have some details on the company, but not the specific project. And there might only be like one for each like generic job type at a mid-sized company.
Gotcha.
Sometimes at a bigger company, they'll have like a few different ones.
And they're like posting that on Indeed or something where it would get a lot of traffic.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No. So yeah, definitely haven't taken that tactic, especially when we don't post our real job posts on Indeed very often. But yeah, I do like keeping an eye out. Like we allow people to submit to our through our website all the time. And I do believe that, if you find like that magic unicorn fit, like you got to find budget to hire that person. It's rare that opportunity actually comes up on either side, but I do think it's good practice for us to be receiving applications from anyone who is interested, just to kind of see their name. And then I have reached out to some people later, when we were hiring.
Is that like put in your when you've had those kind of positions or application flows, do you typically put in that application flow that, hey, we may not get back to you, or anything around what the like expectations are going forward from that?
We don't get that many, so I find it manageable to be able to get back to everyone. And I'm usually just mainly encouraging them to follow us on social media, because we'll post a new job there when we have it. So,
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. And, to kind of get a little bit to the next question, right? Can you give an overview? And this is career-wide, right? The styles of hiring programs that you've been involved with, and how many stages there were to hiring. And maybe Jarae or Miranda can provide more insight when you've had like a contract position versus like contract to hire versus full-time hire. And does it change with like the rank of the position? And how can you give like an overview to like the expectation of what each of these stages actually is?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been involved in a ton of different hiring programs. So like I said, it depends on contract to hire, direct hire. I've seen interview processes of like 7 stages, which I think is just too much and ridiculous. And it drags out for a very long time. So something for us is trying to condense that interview process. And if it's a position that's not at like a C level, it's not really necessary for it to be anywhere past like 3 interviews. So when I'm talking to a director or hiring manager, I understand their interview process. So they'll be like, oh, there's a technical screening and then a panel and then a coding interview. And then they're going to meet with the manager. And I'm like, okay, so you just told me 5 interviews. So can we condense these interviews? If you want to have let's have the first screening, the technical screening, the first round, and then let's have the panel, the second round. I think that from there, you should decide if this is like a good candidate or not. Sometimes you'll talk to HR for the 3rd round, which is not, I don't even think they'll go over benefits. So I don't even consider it an interview. But we try to condense that because in this day and age, there's a ton of layoffs, but there's still a lot of people hiring and it's still hard to find talent. So I don't think it's necessary to have anything more than that. So we really talk to our clients and try to condense that, make it short, have those interview times so that the candidate experience is a lot better. Because we don't want to tarnish that. We don't want to tarnish the client's name or anything like that. But the higher level the position goes, the steps there are more interview rounds. I have hired like CISOs where it was like 6 or 7 rounds. But they were also interviewing people with people in Hong Kong and just all over the world. So we were dealing with multiple time zones, but we still try to condense it from there.
Well, so we've definitely had some evolution on our process, and I'll try to go over the old process briefly, but we, for a long time, had 3 rounds. Was a telephone call with just me, just initial screening to kind of filter people down and get to a smaller list to go to the next round. That second round was more of a technical interview with me and another developer on the team. And we would ask questions about technical experience and some behavioral stuff too. And then the final round would be with me and the 2 owners, more of a culture interview and like organizational citizen test. I think that's, fairly normal and standard from what I would think. But we've been trying something for the last year. It's called the A method for hiring. And the way we've been doing it, it's only 2 interviews, but the second one is 3 hours long, which is hard to schedule. It can be a little intense, but it allows us to really see the full history of someone's work. You basically break down their jobs into chapters, and we ask the same 4 questions for each job. And that really allows us to peek into what they've actually done, rather than kind of a canned answer. And so far it has worked really well, but it's definitely very different than people are used to. And even though there's only the 2 steps of interviews, it sometimes can take so long to schedule that second interview with our owners who are already busy that sometimes we still end up having a longer hiring cycle than is advantageous for us or the people we're hiring. But everything that we do is always a work in progress. And we're definitely seeing some benefits of trying this new method.
That's really interesting to kind of hear some of the perspective. Did we have a comment from Cynthia?
Yes, from Cynthia, she didn't really elaborate on the styles of the hiring programs, but she did answer does the question, does this change with the rank of the position? And she says extra levels, but the style is the same.
Okay, that's interesting. So I'm going to throw people for a loop here for these. So to give you a little perspective, I did over 100 interviews this year before landing a handful of jobs that I wanted. I landed some ones I didn't, right? But and I'll also say my record for number of interviews for a single position was 15.
That's too much.
And this cycle of interviews, the most I had was 12.
Wow.
These were for head of X engineering. Both of these that high of a number were for head of X engineering organization in household name companies. So you got all of the executive seat, like, SVP, everybody's got to meet you. CTO, everybody's got to check off on you type of thing that you would have for a VP or SVP position. In addition to all of the sets of interview rounds that you would have for an IC position. And that's how you get to that number.
That's wild.
So And for kind of a typical high-level IC position in a FANG style. So if anybody's familiar with that, being like kind of the big tech companies, pretty typically 7 is standard. 9 on the higher end, depending on what your positions are. So if you're looking at staff or above, you know, it's guaranteed 7 to 9. Senior 5 to 7 for the most part. What does that entail? There's usually a, you know, kind of technical screen that happens first. Then there is a basic algorithms where you're given some sort of live coding task. Then you're usually given kind of another one of those after doing a kind of more in-depth technical screen with someone directly on that team. And then so you have your tech screen, your live coding, your like technical verbal communication interview. Then you have another live coding. Then you very typically have an architecture exam where you actually physically design and build out like a system. Then there's also a project overview interview. So we're already at 5. Hello, everyone. And then typically you would also then have a meeting with the hiring manager. And you might have like one other kind of thing thrown in here with like design or product or somebody else on the team to kind of pull that whole thing together, or like a skip level. So there's that, and then one above the your manager. So and that's your 7, and it can go higher from there because sometimes they want a third one of you to do like a live coding in their system, not off of a like leak code style algorithm style of coding through. And sometimes, depending on the company, they will also do that like kind of 3-hour in-depth like system performance kind of interview as well. So the kind of the styles I've been a part of have been everything from, at least from my experience, in primarily IC or like combination manager IC roles, has been kind of all over the place. You can have like a full day interview where they just keep sending people in your room, or you can have you go someplace for 3 hours, spend the whole time, you know, meeting with everybody on the team. You might do some whiteboarding, and it's kind of like a casual code and connect kind of event, just like what we would have here. And it's all different, is what I'll say. But I will also throw this out there that if you are looking for one of the higher paid remote jobs, working for I will say this has actually become quite pervasive. The FANG style interview has become very much pervasive. That at least 5. You know, of course, depending on pay, depending on standards. But I will say that like the most difficult interview that I went through this year was for a company of less than 20 people. So it's not necessarily indicated by size, and that was not one of the higher paying positions either. So just providing some perspective there. It can be all over the place. That's why you see people on Blind going like, oh, we got to grind leak code like crazy and grind 75 and everything else. And it can have a lot to do with the company that you're targeting, which is why I would say do your research on what their processes are.
I have a question. So and I think it's just overall when I speak to developers and the coding challenges or doing them live, I feel like there's a huge debate on that of Like a lot of people don't like it because they feel a lot of pressure. They can't code like they normally would on their self. Like, what is your perspective on that? Do you think it's useful? Do you?
It's it can be a bit of theater, but it also depends on the position that you're hiring for. If you're hiring someone to be an educator and a communicator, who this is going to be something that they do on the regular, in helping somebody else, like if they are I would say a staff level engineer or above, right? Like it's, if they're not, there's different staff archetypes. Please read into that. You don't have to follow just one, but if they're looking for that position to have like high levels of communication, mentoring and teaching capabilities, if that's something that they're interviewing for specifically, that can have a lot of value for them. But then there's organizations that have an either or. So like to throw that out there is Block. Block does an either or. Would you like to do a live coding? Or would you like to do the take-home project? I did the live coding because I'm like, I'm going to spend an hour of time talking to you versus at least 4 to 6 hours of time. Because they say, hey, this can be done in a certain amount of time. That's because they know that code back and forth. Right? You're getting dropped into this. I think the one that was so like maddening for me is I had an experience this year, which did not turn out well, where the recruiter did not send me the right set of instructions, and then I was dropped into a code base I had never seen and didn't compile. So I spent a lot of time fixing it to compile because it hadn't been updated. Since the previous year, so it didn't have any of the matching stuff for what you need for like the latest and greatest of the stuff I do. And I was not able to succeed because that throws you off. Like I wrote everything down in pseudocode, but of course I wasn't going to meet like what their metrics were, because their metrics were based off of a set of completion and expectations that assumes that I was sent those instructions. And I wasn't. So, of course, like I'm having to figure out everything on the fly versus being able to spend a little bit of time ahead of time, study it, and know what I might be coming into. So for some people, I mean, I was able to get a lot, but I wasn't able to do anywhere near my normal level of success. I had to write certain things out in pseudocode. I showed the architecture, I wrote down all those things, but because of the size of company they have to go based off of a bullet point list, right? And so did they complete these items? It doesn't matter. So here's the other part. Even though it's their mistake, they have enough people coming through their pipeline that dropping you is whatever. That's them adhering to their processes. Number of the companies this year that did layoffs, if you were in process interviewing with them and you were dropped because they had a layoff, and they have a 1-year interview process, like rotation, which is very common for you to reapply, none of these places, even if they told you that you were dropped from the thing because they are no longer staffing or the position no longer exists, you are not allowed to reapply. Virtually all of them did not change their policies, even if they reopened for hiring, which is insane to me. It's so, there's a lot of things that are impersonal about that particular system. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's what the job's like or that's what the people are like. It's just the process that they designed to get the results that they want.
Yeah. And when you have hundreds and thousands of people to sift through, like you have to have something that filters and narrows, I'm sure, but
at every single stage, and it has to be backed up.
Yeah.
There's legal implications, right?
Yeah. So, For me to jump in and answer Dre's question too, I personally, I was laid off from my first job. It was a big shock. It was very challenging to my ego because I thought I was doing really well, and I think I was. It was about 50% of the company laid off after several rounds.
Yeah.
But regardless, I found myself looking for a job. Ended up interviewing at a very traditional place. It was like, I believe, two older men in the room with me, and I had, a whiteboard coding challenge. And I was only a year out of college, so like these are things I should have known, and I think I did, but I was just kind of so uncomfortable, like felt unwelcome in that space. And so, had that early experience of knowing that I'm intelligent, knowing that I'm smart, and then just kind of failing in one of those interviews and not getting offered that kind of job. I think it was best for me in the end. Really love where I ended up. It's the same place I'm at now. But it was, definitely informed what I did with hiring going forward. I also have heard from several women too that they've gone through those and they're crying while they're doing it, like it's that stressful. And so I've really tried to not do live coding stuff. And instead, we do a couple of things. One, like Jarae mentioned earlier, I am pretty much only entertaining someone with some sort of portfolio or some sort of link or project to show, even for beginners. And sometimes even especially for beginners, it's important for me to see that they've been able to put something together for themselves by themselves, even if it's small and even if it's basic. And because we are full stack developers, that visual element is so important. If I can see the history of their work, that speaks volumes to me. And then another thing we do, if we're not sure from, their previous work, and especially for lower levels of devs, we will do a paid test project where they might spend, 10 to 15 hours building something that we then review. And that would be the last stage of things, essentially just verification after we've selected the one person that we think will be a good fit.
Paid interview.
Yeah.
Read on that?
Huh?
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So it's a test project where we would give a design and a set of detailed instructions about, we want you to do this, this, and this. Usually what we've done in the past is take some semi-recent design and strip some things away, or just like have them do a homepage. And for a beginner, they might just be doing static HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. For someone more advanced, we might ask them to plug it into a content management system, really basic setup.
And you said paid.
Yes. So we ask them what their hourly rate is, and we kind of talk about how long they think it will take, and let's say as long as it's not more than 20 hours, we pay them for their work.
Wow. That is amazing. I have definitely come across so many more that are the opposite, where they want you to do 15 or 20 hours of work as a showcase of your work, doing their specific project, even if you have a GitHub that has a very extensive amount of information. That's amazing.
It's a really big time investment for people. That period of looking for a new job is often stressful. I don't think that most people are looking of their own volition, right? Something stressful is going on, and they might be doing this with lots of different companies. So we think it's the right thing to do to pay for that test project if we're going to ask people to do it.
Yeah, that's
great. To know that that's uncommon.
It is. It is not.
Oh man, that's interesting. So, as part of that, like kind of going into some of these things, and especially, I want to know from the recruiter side, how do you prepare your candidates? Do you provide like documentation, written overview, especially when you might have some like wishy-washy initial requirements given to you? Like how do you get people set up to be successful? And I think one of the greatest things is like when you have a recruiter that's really like working with you, and it's a story of mutual success, right? Because the recruiter wants to get somebody hired into the position, and that, you know, that meets those requirements. If you can be that person, how do we make this work?
Yeah, for us, we prep all of our candidates. I like to do my preps over video, and then we'll go over the company and what we discussed with the hiring manager, or what the hiring manager is looking for. Also, sometimes we hire for the same like common skill sets with like a hiring manager. So any like interviews that like have happened in the past, any questions, we'll just let them know, hey, these are the typical questions you may hear, and this is what they're going to ask, so that they're prepped for those questions. Sometimes I will walk a candidate through and say, walk me through that, explain how you would answer this question or answer it, and kind of help tailor that with them. So we do prep them. We send them documentations, common interview questions to ask, what to be prepared for, common questions. I know there's always the, you know, your greatest weakness questions that everyone's always afraid to ask. So we prep them through that. We send also, you always want to know who you're meeting with. So anyone that's going to be involved in that panel interview, anyone that's going to be on that interview, we send the LinkedIns of the managers to them. So we make sure that they're really prepped and ready, because it helps us. We want to make sure we help them, and, you know, we fill the role, and that they're as prepped as possible. We never want someone walking in not knowing anything. And if it's something I don't really know, like I had a manager recently, it's the first time I've worked with them, but I've worked with the company for a while. I did let them know this, you know, this is the first time we've worked with the manager. I don't have a ton of insight of what the interview is going to be like. I do know he's very technical, so he is going to ask you very technical questions. I would be prepared for that. I would brush up on that, and you know, really have questions to ask him too on what you're going to be doing. I think that's something else that a lot of people forget, is having those questions to ask the interviewer too. But we make sure that they're very prepped for that. So.
May I chime in on Cynthia's behalf? Okay, Cynthia says, for the question, how have you prepared candidates for the interview process? The documentation portion, she says in the second round, we do require a presentation based on prompt and proposal. For the written overview, there is a written job description, a verbal overview. Yes, there is a verbal overview. Some helpful hints. She says that yes, one of their director does like doing FANG interviews. So she tells her candidates not to get ruffled by it, because overall their culture is not like that. And for recommendations on whether people should invest in paid services like subscription coaches and mentors, she has not done that. She has not recommended that.
So I definitely got some ideas from Jarae's stuff there. I think that seems great to like send the LinkedIn profiles of the interviewers. I'll keep that in mind for next time. But I will say, since our interviews aren't overly technical, I'm mainly just giving an overview of what to expect via email before each step. And especially with our new style, telling people that it's going to be different than they are used to, and that the goal is really for them to be able to like share their story of their work history. And then for the test project too, of course, I'm giving detailed written description of what I want to see, requesting that people ask questions, because that's an important part of working together. I want to also not see their work, but also how they got there, and like what things they didn't understand, because I'm only one person putting this together, and it's never going to be 100% comprehensive. So it's good to see where people test assumptions too.
That's kind of interesting, especially because you've both touched on like kind of being able to speak to your career overviews and things like that. Would you recommend that people really invest the time to kind of star method out those stories in their history so that they can kind of have the elevator pitch ready for all of those, right? Like, what's your biggest failure? What would you change? What was the time you were outvoted? All of those kinds of things. I feel like they're pretty common, but sometimes you can get caught off guard. Like, do you recommend people keep notes, like, in the interview process?
Yeah, I recommend that. And I recommend, like, when I interview for places, I write down, like, to common interview questions, I write down the questions and then I repeat it to myself, like, over and over again out loud. It sounds like kind of crazy, but I think it allows you to be more confident. And then when you're on an interview or you're speaking to someone, it just flows so much easier. So I do the STAR method. I write that down, and it does help when it comes to, interviewing and answering those questions in a more clear and concise, like, manner. So I highly suggest that. I highly suggest speaking, like, answering questions, I guess, to yourself out loud, because it definitely helps with confidence and a confidence boost. So yeah.
Yeah. One other thing we in our interview process, our newer one, we do ask for strengths and weaknesses, but the difference in this system is we ask for 8 to 12 strengths. So a lot of them. And it's interesting. I mean, I know most people have prepared strengths, but they usually stop at 2 or 3. And I'm always having to prompt people, like, well, what would your mother say you're good at or you're strong at? Think about your soft skills. So that's one bit of advice I would recommend to you too, is when you're writing down your strengths and your weaknesses too, write down more than feels natural, so that you can really showcase the whole of yourself and not just, I'm really great at JavaScript and CSS, right? I want to know that you're a great team player, right? And that you can really rally people and bring the energy up. Or I want to know that you're the cooling, calm presence. Whatever those things are very important to the dynamics of a team as well.
So does that change for, like, an entry level position, or kind of the same requirements apply?
For strengths and weaknesses, or?
Yeah, really how they, kind of sell their story. I kind of consider, like, these portions like the sales pitch, right? Like, why you, right? Why you and not this other person who has the same list of specifications, right?
Yeah, I think you always have to remember that your story is your story. So even if you're like you just graduated or you're out of a boot camp, what led you to that boot camp? What led you to school and for you to study what you studied? How did you get there? Did you play a sport? Were you in a sorority? Did you balance multiple things in college? Were you working a job and in college full time? Like, really, what is your story? And elaborate on that and how that transitions into the job that you're applying for. I think we tend to forget that your story is what you've done, but how did you get there? And I think it's really easy to relate it to what you're doing for or what you're applying for in your next role. And a lot of that at an entry level standpoint is going to come from that passion and your experience in school or the boot camp or wherever you may have come from. But being able to tell your story is really important.
And I think especially if you're entry level, thinking broadly about what soft skills you bring to the table. And then anything, so when we're looking at entry level, we're looking for potential, right? We know that you're not coming in with the same technical chops as other people. So help us see the potential, right? And that can come through soft skills. It can come through showing skills that relate to development, like problem solving in your former jobs or in high school. If you're younger, how did you solve problems, or do something with a soft skill that's adjacent, right? That allows the hiring manager to see the potential.
So I think what's kind of interesting that we kind of brought in from the audience just now was what about this changes with them being an introvert or an extrovert? Does this affect how they are able to perform overall in the interview cycle?
I think it does. I mean, I think there's a lot of people in tech. I mean, it depends on the job. There's a lot of people in tech that they want to code and they want to say, and they don't want to in coding, and they don't want to do like external communication face with like a client or anything like that. But you are going to have to interface with the team. So it's important on how you're going to get along with that team. But there's also some people that just have really great coding skills and they might not be as extroverted. So I think it's just, it's really hard to answer. I do think it affects it, but I think it still just all goes with like your personality and where you fit on that team. So there's a lot of people that you don't need a super extroverted person to be on the team or an introverted person. So
Yeah.
I would argue you can have real conflict on a team. If you have one person who's like a super extrovert in a team of introverts, it really ooh, it gets weird.
yeah. And that, I think that's really understanding the team and what you're really looking for. Because we'll have managers that are like, we just, there's some people that just put their heads down and work, and that's all that they're looking for. So
Yeah. And I don't see an innate benefit to extroversion over introversion. I know that people of all types can be good communicators. I think that if you struggle with verbal communication, there's a chance you might struggle in an interview, but be cognizant too that that can happen to extroverts alike. And, maybe they're talking too much. Maybe they're running on or not actively listening. So there are communication barriers across all of those spectrums. And if you struggle with that, I would definitely recommend practicing, like has been recommended already. And especially if you can practice with a friend, a family member, partner, that's ideal. I also see in the chat here that someone asked about, people coming in with high energy. I want to clarify too that that was just an example, right, of a soft skill that someone may bring to the table. It is not a requirement. It's not necessary. On the flip side, if you bring that cool-headed, calming presence, right, that's just as much of a benefit to a well-rounded team as someone who is the hype person, right? So it's all about finding what is unique to you and what you have to bring to the team.
I think it's actually really amazing when you can kind of have both.
Mm.
Right? Like you have that kind of coach parent mentality kind of thing going, where it's the calm, cool-headed one in the room, doesn't speak up as much, but if there is something to to be said, and then you have the maybe somebody else on the team who's the hype person, like, hey y'all, let's get going, da 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 da, like just so excited about what we're going to be doing next. Because both bring value.
Mm-hmm.
If you have too many people that are the same in the way that they think or present, it things do not turn out well. So like as part of that, is it kind of two pieces, right? Like, do candidates need to nail every interview now? And how much can like the leveling change in the interview cycle? And I say this to say that like the job posted might be senior, but as part of going through the cycle, you might say, okay, well, they're not quite senior yet. Or like, whoa, these people are way beyond senior. This person is like running IBM in the 60s over here, right? So, kind of in both of those camps, like, do you need to nail everything to get the job? And can your levels and expectations change throughout the process? And like, how do you work with candidates on that?
I think so. For interviews, I would make sure that you're as prepared as possible, research the company, I've had clients say where I've literally prepped the candidate, told them what the company did, sent them a link. They were researching the company as they were on a video interview with the client. I think we tend to forget that we're interviewing the interviewer as much as they're interviewing us. And you're interviewing to make sure this aligns with where you want to go with your career, if it's going to be a fit. So make sure you do your research in that company, what they're doing. If they're a publicly traded company, I always look at like their financials or anything that's posted online. And typically in that research or anything that's posted, you can see what they're doing for the next year, what their goals are for 2022, and you can tie that back into your interview. But make sure that you're prepared for the interview for every step. You're looking at those LinkedIns if they're provided. And I would say, I don't think you necessarily have to nail every interview, but don't get too comfortable. I think a lot of people get very comfortable, and they can say things that they probably shouldn't say in like a professional sense. So I would say just be mindful that you are still interviewing, even if you feel that you like this is going to be the most amazing company you're ever going to work for. Still understand that there's other people interviewing, and don't get too comfortable until you have that like offer in hand. Obviously you want to know every interview and walk out thinking you did amazing job, but I think a lot of that comes with preparation too.
Yeah, I'd say that most of the time you need to nail or come close to nailing interviews. But there's sometimes opportunity, right? It kind of depends on who else has applied, who else has gotten through, who else hasn't taken a job yet. There have definitely been times when I've had to hire someone at a lower level than I originally anticipated because we just didn't get enough candidates. And then, we mentored that person up and it worked out. So I think this might be a question at some point later too, but I do encourage people to apply for things that they're not sure that they'll get. There could be some wasted time, and you have to be okay with that and like go in knowing that there might be some no's, but if nothing else, it's good practice. And sometimes there is a chance, right, that the employer is not going to have that many qualified candidates, and you might be able to position yourself on your soft skills and your potential and be the one that rises to the top.
And if you come out of an interview and you think you didn't nail it or you didn't do well, it's always a learning experience. You mentioned when you did that, you were nervous when you got laid off and you did that, coding, whiteboarding, but it was a good learning experience. So, everything is an experience. And sometimes I record my interviews by myself and listen to them later to see how I did. I probably won't be interviewing for a long time, but it helps me. So everything is like a learning lesson for you.
Jarae, that's interesting. I keep a voice recorder at my desk specifically to only record my side of a conversation. So that I can make sure that, what I thought I said is actually what I said, which sounds illogical, but it totally is a thing. So that can be really great practice as well, just in terms of a reflection. Also, sometimes depending on what you're doing, if you're meeting with various folks, sometimes that can be really helpful for you to work on present skills and other things. So we've talked a lot about different ways to set yourself apart as a candidate. So looking up who your interviewers are going to be and doing some research on LinkedIn, figuring out the company, doing research on the company, knowing what their goals are, knowing how you fit. These are all things that also play into the negotiation process. Wink, wink, hint, hint. And I think, Jarae, one of the things that you kind of hinted at but didn't quite go into is a lot of companies have some portion of their interview where they're measuring you against either their company motto or their company statement. Do you think it's really important to kind of like find that and then just figure out what your like star examples are towards their like company values or any of those kinds of things?
Yeah, I think it's important to know like what their values are, what their mission statement is, and how you fit into that. Because there are a lot of these smaller, mid-sized companies that really, truly live by that. And, you know, if you're looking at to be at this company for the next 3 years, you really want to understand if you like abide by that. And so I would look that up. Also, I would look up Glassdoor reviews. A lot of disgruntled employees post reviews, but a lot of them are truthful, and they have a lot of their interview process on Glassdoor for those specific like positions. So I'd make sure you're looking that up too. So you can take a look in that, but I would definitely look up their mission statement, their values, and how you align with those.
That's interesting on the Glassdoor side. I think one time I saw somebody leave a very negative review for the job I was potentially looking to apply to. So it was like, oop, skip on that one. Bye.
My
Go ahead.
my first job in recruiting, the place that I interviewed at had like 2.5 stars on Glassdoor. And I was like, I'm not going to go to this interview. And then my little sister was like, I think you should go. You never know. And I ended up going and they hired me. I was like 15 minutes late. And I was like, listen, I saw some terrible reviews. I almost didn't come to this interview. This is when you were like on site, and they did hire me. And that's where I got into recruiting, and I ended up falling in love with it, even though their interviews were very bad. So, it was a great experience to do that, but you know, take them for what it is on Glassdoor, but they do have interviews on there.
Sometimes though, also like I would just say, sometimes kissing a frog, you both talked about experience, right? In getting that kind of positive experience down. The job I ended up taking is from, and we're going to keep this between us and the internet, everybody. I originally applied for the job. I was not necessarily that interested. It's a different job than what I have. Made it through their interview process, apparently passed it, but then the job like kind of disappeared. But then they had this other thing. And so I was like waiting for a week. I'm like, I haven't heard anything back. Well, whatever. And they were like, well, actually, we were trying to see if we could get you to do this whole other division we're starting, right? Like, we would like for you to meet with the VP of that and this, and like, maybe you could be that person. So sometimes you might get opportunities offered to you different than what you were interviewing for. That's kind of an interesting thing here. Like, I would say like kiss a lot of frogs, because sometimes the things that you think are very aspirational are not necessarily aspirational. It really depends on what you're looking for. So, all right, we're getting close to the end. What are your personal interview red flags as an interviewee and as an interviewer? What do you see people do and go, no? And what would make you go, no, to another company?
I would say, not being like well prepped for the interview, not researching the company. So that goes along with that. Showing up late, not if it's a video interview, please like log on 5 minutes before. Like if you don't know how to work like the technology, or you don't have Teams downloaded on your computer, you knew when the interview was. So not having that technology set up. Interviewing from your car, unless you're like on site every day and like you have to like let that person know like, hey, I'm gonna have to take this from my car. Or I would suggest maybe going to a Starbucks or like a library somewhere, because it doesn't look good. And not being able to speak to your resume, I would say one of the number one, the like feedback from hiring managers is they will talk to candidates. They have a lot of skill sets dumped on their resume, but they're not able to speak to it. So if something's on your resume, be able to speak to it, be able to elaborate on it. And then if there's a question asked of you and you don't know it, be honest. Say, I don't know that technology. I haven't worked with it, but I think it's something I'd be able to quickly learn, or I will research that and get back to you. And then not having questions to ask. Again, you're interviewing these people as much as they're interviewing you. So make sure you do have questions to ask and how you're going to fit into that company. And if it's something that you're going to align in, hopefully you'll end up with multiple offers and you get the opportunity to choose, but you need to ask as many questions as you can for them. And then on the other side, if for someone that's interviewing you, if the process is drawn out, they don't give you feedback, they have a ton of interviews with no end in sight, I would say that is pretty big red flags. Also, if you see anything on Glassdoor that have like negative reviews for a particular position, I would bring it up in the interview. I've brought that up before. Like, I see that you don't have great reviews on Glassdoor, or why do you think that is? So if they can't answer that, or they answer that in a really strange way, I would say that's a red flag.
Okay, those are great. I will just add a few. So for the interviewee, I'm looking at written communication too. So if someone has a bunch of typos, that's a red flag to me because I'm looking for, full stack developers. And to me, it's like a precursor of quality assurance, right? Like these are very important communications. There's not that many of them. So double check, maybe triple check every email that you write, especially if you're doing it from your phone, because it's so easy to make typos. And if you mess up and make one and realize it, I am never going to penalize someone if they catch it, and they write back of like, oh, I'm sorry, that was the riddle with typos. I'm on my phone or whatever. Like, totally understand. But I don't know that everyone looks for this, but I think about it because and even if it's not a skill of yours, you can have someone double check for you. You can run it through, Chat GPT to prove, these days, very easy, right? To have something proofread for you. And it's okay that, if you have typos later on, I know that that's not necessarily going to get in the way of communication, but it's a very, it feels representative to me of whether or not you're going to check your work later on. Another red flag for me, it just did not look professional. I had one person interviewing, and it's totally fine if your desk is in a bedroom, but make sure the bed is made behind you and that it doesn't look sloppy. Not a good look if you're in a bedroom and you can directly see an unmade bed behind you. And I get I don't make my bed every day, but if I had, well, put your blur on, that's fine. Yeah. But if you have a messy space, put your blur on. Try to make sure that what's behind you, it doesn't have to look pristine. It doesn't have to look perfect, but we want to be looking for someone who at least is semi-observant. I think you're on mute, Stacy.
Just to blur your background.
Blur your background.
I mean, this you can kind of see like remnants of the blankets and things over there, and kids' jackets at the end of the table. Look at that. It's magically gone.
It looks nice. Just interesting colors in the background.
How professional do I look now? Like a normal level of professional. So really, this is just kind of a last follow-up thing. We've made it through the interview cycle. How do you feel about the kind of contact afterward and follow-up afterward and your follow-up? We're kind of at time, so if we can make it a little quick, but do you supply feedback? Do you, how do people feel about kind of the scoping in on, sending people LinkedIn messages or follow-up emails or an email to the recruiter to thank the interviewers. What is that something that stands out? Does it matter? Any of that? Oh, Dre, you're muted.
Yeah. I always ask my candidates to send thank you notes, and I send it to the managers. It also helps me push for feedback. Typically, we have feedback on the manager's calendar right after they interview 2 or 3 candidates in the same day. So we typically know that feedback and we give it back to the candidates. But I also like a thank you note to send along, because a lot of candidates don't send thank you notes. And for me, I think it sets a lot of people apart. So I always ask for it. And I always suggest when you're closing an interview, reiterate why you're a good fit to that hiring manager and why you're interested in the position, which also you should put in your thank you note.
Yeah. I honestly, not that many people do it. So it does make you stand out, even though it's advised, so I always think when I receive a thank you note, it's nice to see.
Yeah. And you can always say, I think someone asked, via like email. Yeah. You can put your thank you note in like an email to them.
And if they haven't given clear direction about like what might be next or when they can expect to hear back, it's, not a problem to try to ask for that then. You might you try to be understanding that the hiring process takes a lot of time, so they might not get back to you right away, but they should, within a few days at least. You're muted again, Stacy.
And depending on the group, it can be a few weeks. I've heard as late as like 3 or 4 weeks after, at which point I was like, oh, I'm totally like, I wrote you off, like, bye, Felicia. But and I've had people come back with positive, so it's kind of interesting. So we are at time. Where can we find you? What are you up to? Tell us about it, Jarae, Miranda, and Cynthia, I know, had some comments on this specifically.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm up to hiring people always. So if you're on the market, contact me. I just started at Refactor Talent, but I've been in the industry for a while. Right now, I'm having a lot of meetings with CIOs, CTOs that are planning on hiring at the beginning of 2024. So they're doing all their budgeting right now. So just remember, a lot of budgeting is being done if someone's fiscal year does start, like a normal fiscal year in the beginning of January. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I have Twitter. I really just like tweet funny things when I'm watching a show, but I still use it. I do use Twitter to recruit people too. But you can find me on LinkedIn.
Cool. Yeah. So I definitely find me on LinkedIn. I'm on X, Twitter too, but I could never convince myself, even before all the kerfuffle, to like actively use it. So I'll get notified if you send me a message that way, but LinkedIn is better. And one thing I'd encourage you all to look at if you're interested, Springfield Women Technology just did a tech workplace survey and released the results in the form of a video and a PDF report. We wanted to look at what differences, if any, there were between women and men when it comes to benefits and ways they prefer to be compensated, and then also their experiences in the workplace and salary and things. The results were really interesting. We were all sometimes surprised by the things that everyone had in common, and then unfortunately not too surprised by the things that were different. But I don't want to take up too much time. So if you want to check that out, definitely follow me on LinkedIn. And I have a really recent post with some links to that.
For Cynthia really wanted to promote this opportunity, the Business Analyst Series 2023, which combines the self-study lessons, including in the UiPath Automation Business Analyst Foundation Learning Plan, with UiPath technology experts who will review important material highlights and help with questions you have while going through the program. This series is designed as a 5-week program with time in between classes to digest the material, write down what questions you have, and get answers as you proceed through the next lesson. Students can access the forum to ask questions during the process to get responses as well. The UiPath community team has put together this series with their partner, The Next Innings, who helps women who are looking to further their career in automation through business analyst training. Anyone can sign up for this series and take advantage of this program, and I shared the link in the chat.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was so excited to get to know you a little bit more. And we might be able to ask some kind of after hours questions if you want to stay on for a little bit longer.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.